Hello everyone. My research topic for tonight is virtual worlds. Now, the definition of virtual worlds research is computer-based simulated environment where users interact with other users through graphic or textual representations of themselves utilizing textual chat, voice, video, or other forms of communication. I looked at a lot of different definitions, and this is the best one that I got, and it was used from the Journal of Virtual Worlds Research. A brief history of how virtual worlds started was basically there are two sort of outputs for it. One is through social networking. The first program was called 6 Degrees, which came out in 1997. It sort of evolved in something called netographicy, which this guy has developed, and it's pretty much all he does is work on this sort of interaction between people when they get onto a computer. The second one, it was online gaming, which is the one we're probably a little bit more familiar with in terms of for doing this type of research. And they were basically gone into two different variations. One is computer simulations, and the other one is 3D virtual worlds. Now, the virtual worlds definition requires that it's more persistent. In other words, you don't turn it on and off unlike a game. So a computer simulation, you may go into it, start a while, stop it. It's a little bit more like an online game, whereas the virtual world or 3D worlds, they're always going, so you can come in and out of them. If you set up some sort of simulation in one of the virtual worlds, you're able to use it and you can leave and somebody else can come into it. So there's always a lot of different active players going around it. Here are some more definitions of virtual worlds. An online community with computer-based simulated environment through which users can interact with one another and use and create objects. Interactive 3D virtual environments where the users take the form of avatars. The avatars usually appear as textual, two-dimensional, or three-dimensional representations, though other forms are possible. That would be just through voice or through touch programs. Typically, there are lots of multiple users. Now, the difference between the two virtual worlds, one we're going to call it virtual worlds, the other one's computer simulations. In the virtual worlds, there are undefined boundaries. In other words, people are coming in and out. You can go off to different areas. You can be easily distracted. It is called a world. It's not a small space. So a computer simulation is usually more of a small space. The best one I can think of is usually like a flight simulator where you go in and you test how to fly. You can do that. That would be a good example of a computer simulation. Where the virtual worlds is more like a Second Life or Gaia or one of these other programs where you set up an account and go in and out when you want to. Another important difference is that in the virtual worlds, the participants usually have control over what goes on. So if they get tired of it, they can go to somewhere else. Or like I said, they also can come in and out. Typically on the computer simulation, the researcher has all the control. He's controlling the events and what happens. The other third important aspect is that the virtual worlds, once again, I want to emphasize the real-time aspect of it. It's always going, so people are coming in and out. You can change things over time. Typically a computer simulation, it's a repeatable thing. You go in, you can start over again, you start from the beginning. The usefulness in research, you can create real-life scenarios, whether it's a simulation or the real worlds. It's usually used for studies of human interaction because the people or the avatars they're using or how you're communicating, it's real people. It's not like you're talking to some sort of simulated person. I mean, it is a real person behind there. And so you can get a lot of interactive sort of material you probably couldn't get any other way. You can also monitor developments over time. That's another one of the important aspects of it. So if you set up one of these models, you can go back every once in a while and check out and see how things are going, have different people come in. So that's a big bonus. You can explore sensitive issues. One advantage of the avatar is that people are anonymous. So they may, open up a little bit more. They can sort of be themselves or not be themselves, or you might be able to gain lots of useful information that way. You can also explore values and different viewpoints that the people may have. Um, so you don't have that face-to-face person interaction can sometimes, you know, free people up to say things they may not normally. So that's one of the big benefits of utilizing this in research. Data collection and analysis. Typical ways are online recording through video. There's usually text chat boxes that can also be recorded, and they're also time stamped. That's another important aspect of this. You could also do signing, American Sign Language, if that was something you wanted to test. So it has a different element in there. The analysis of the data is done through the different communication channels that we just discussed. So you can do data triangulation. In other words, you can also have the researcher in there with the participants. The participants can be recording the interaction between the participants, and the observer can be recording his observations. Another nice thing about it is you can convert into numbers for quantitative analysis, what's going on, so you can codify certain actions relatively easy. Now of course, there are drawbacks. One of the bigger drawbacks is that it has a high learning curve. This is probably for both the researchers and the participants. Um, it's still artificial. It's still not a real life situation. So part of being anonymous, as we were discussing earlier, can also be a drawback. People may do things they may not ordinarily do. So it's not quite like a real life simulation for what you're testing. Another drawback could be the cost of programming. Just because the application's free to get into, such as Second Life, you still have to build an area. You still have to design it. If you're making it just a pure computer simulation, you have to have somebody program it. So it does take a lot of time to set up and to think about and to test. The other thing is the participants that you have, you either have to spend time training them or they already have to have some sort of expertise in using avatars and navigating through a virtual world. Some other drawbacks are that typically these are cutting edge programs, and so they usually require a high-speed internet connection. That can also cut down on your availability of participants. There are things that can go wrong with internet connections. They can have lag times. They can shut off. So if you're trying to conduct some sort of research, your participants can come in and out. That can actually be a rather big problem if you're trying to get people to interact, in real time and the internet connections going in and out. Also, another challenge is that you probably need newer type of equipment since these programs are constantly being upgraded and improved to give them a more real life-like appearance. They usually have, high-end graphics cards associated with them. For my examples, I picked out 3, and I got them all from the Journal of Virtual Worlds Research. I found it to be an excellent source. It's online, it's peer-reviewed. They typically focus on research methodologies and case studies of how particular methods are being developed and used in virtual worlds research. So the 3 ones that I picked, the first one was a comparison study. It was called Integrated Framework for Simulation-Based Training on Video and in Virtual World. What they did was they took some lesson plans, and one of them they put into a video-based training. It was on a computer. It was a person talking. The participants would answer questions. They then took another group of people and did the same thing in a virtual world where the people became avatars and actually walked in and sat down and answered the question, the interaction with the interviewer. Was more like, the one reason I picked this one study, because it was more like a computer simulation act done within a virtual world. In other words, they set up an office. That's only thing that people did. They went in there. It still had the other benefits of keep going on, and not necessarily being turned on and off. However, were in sort of a closed environment. One of the things the researchers wanted to find out is how did the learners behave differently between taking the video-based training, which they considered passive. In other words, they're sitting there at the computer screen, it's coming one way, the person there is talking to them, they just answer questions, as opposed to the more active one through the virtual worlds, where they're actually an avatar and talking to somebody. That was kind of the interesting aspect of that study. The second one was actually done here at the University of Hawaii. It was a case study where the research were testing two different types of analyses on students taking a graduate class on teaching in Second Life. So they were doing a constant comparative and a discourse analysis to study basically the students, how they reacted to learning the different things within Second Life. They had a very detailed way of how they recorded the information, which also was nice. They recorded the classes. Since it was a structured class, they had a time, they had the cameras going, or videos going I should say. So they had a record of that. They had a record of the chat boxes going on, so that's all text. This is alternative communication. It's something like what you see on Blackboard. You have a chat box. There's somebody, people can talk, and they also text in between. They had a record of that. And then also the students were required to keep blogs off discussing, how the class went. So they had all these three different types of data that they were able to collect. Now the last one was more focused on how the researchers would use these things within Second Life. So it was more of an empirical qualitative study. It was more a contextual inquiry because the researchers were in there with the participants and they were seeing how that reaction was actually having the avatars together and the interaction, as opposed to the typical one where the people are just learning things from one way. So this one focused a lot on the ethical norms, the ethics of being in an avatar. When they went to get their IRBs, they had to, were concerned about, getting permission. Is an avatar a real person? What are the things you have to be concerned about? They focused a lot on the identities, the thing of being anonymous, being an avatar. Were they being giving correct or real answers? The different communications that the people were using, the text, the voice, also just the direct interaction, that have an effect on the researcher and the participants. And also they looked at what kind of skills. They spent a lot of time training everybody, which is unlike the other studies. They spent literally weeks having people go through Second Life and learn how to do everything. They also looked at the interviewing and focus groups within the virtual world of Second Life. So how did that affect? Was it different? How did the researchers and the participants interact? They also looked at the different modes of data collection. Now, if that's it, if you have any questions, please email me. I've enjoyed it, and thank you very much.